Yo, what's good, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the Gifted Hoops podcast. And I am back for more Pelicans talks with my guy, Chris. All of his links will be in the description box as a diehard Pelicans fan and cover of the team. Chris, how you feeling? Welcome back to the show.
Bro, it's happy to be here again, man. I know we did one last year, man. That was pretty good. So always good to talk to somebody who isn't like, there was somewhat of an outsider about the team and kind of see what they know, see how they view it versus somebody who watches every game, kind of looks at it, man. So cool to do stuff like this.
Yeah, man. I love our overall conversations. I get a lot of insight from you. You watch the ins and outs of this team. You also understand the complexities of the behind the scenes stuff. So yeah. I actually have a lot of questions for you, and I can't wait to get into this episode. Make sure to tap in with Chris. Again, all of his links will be in the description box below. For this podcast, you can find it on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. The video version with our faces and reactions will be on YouTube. Everything at Gifted Hoops. Let's get to the conversation now. Off the rip, first thing I'm going to say, the Pelicans are once again the most interesting team in the Western Conference. I said it last year, and I didn't think I was going to say it again this year, but when the report came out that Herb Jones was going to be at the 5, a lot of people were like, whoa, what are the Pelicans doing? What direction? In my opinion, and I'm not sure how you feel about it yet, I think people are kind of gassing that. I think when they say Herb Jones is the starting 5, I don't think that means he's going to be the full-time 5 per se, but he's going to be like the starter in that type of role. You'll have that alternate between maybe Tice or Zion every now and then. But as someone who really covers the team, how do you feel about the Pelicans starting unit and the big man rotation per se?
Yeah, it's interesting, bro. Like it's not and I'm glad you mentioned that in regards to Herb. Like this team doesn't have a prototypical option, or a traditional option. They're like even Tice is, more, if we're talking from a traditional sense, 6'8". If that on a good day, you're looking at guys like Yves Missy, who may get some minutes early on, but is a raw talent. It's gonna take him some time to kind of learn things. So, and then the other options that you have are question marks, or you got a guy like Trey Jemison, who started some minutes or played some big minutes for Memphis down the stretch last year, but you got to a point to where this season was over with. So, pretty early. So, for the Pelicans, when you talk about their best players, and adding a Dejountae Murray, who we will talk about. Oh yeah, they don't have a real option that they can just throw out there without sacrificing some of their perceived strengths going into the season. And then when you have talents like Zion, front court options like Brandon Ingram, front court options like Trey Murphy, you're kind of forced at that point to lean into those, even if it's not the most the sexiest thing for them to go small, with a lot of the league slowly starting to turn back into bigger set lineups. So, yeah, man. I think that there will be some nights where Herb is guarding 5s. There's some matchups where, last year Brandon Ingram would guard 5s when they went small. And I know a lot of folks want Zion. They think because of the weight, Zion's that option. I just don't. I think in spurts, but I'm not sure if that's something you can, especially with his injury history, if you want him dealing with some of the options night to night that he's going to have to deal with from a traditional 5 sense. So I don't think that they 100. I think they have a plan, but how it's actually going to work, I think you're going to, depending on the matchup, you're going to see different guys out there. You mentioned Tice, you're going to see Herb. Brandon Ingram guarded guys like Jared Allen and Clint Capella when they went small last year. How they do it game to game until maybe the trade deadline, where they possibly ring the bell again on adding another true center, we'll have to see. Yeah,
I gotta say, for me, I'm a bit 50-50 on this for I would say a couple reasons. A, Herb Jones is going to be one of my favorite players in the league. I think his defense is legitimately like one of one in that archetype right now. He's one of the best overall defenders. I even think he has a good chance to win the defensive player of the year if this Pelicans defense can overcome the expectations. I think he's that good. And I think at the same time, the rim protection is what I ask myself about a lot, because Herb Jones and Trey Murphy were both featured in your best defensive lineups. And I think that can stay the same here. But to me, a lot of this isn't necessarily on those two, but it's going to be about Zion and if he can consistently get back to the best version of himself defensively. And also the guy that you did trade for, can Dejounte Murray return to the Spurs level defender we saw, where as his offensive role expanded, his defense kind of waned? Those are my like main question marks for the Pelicans. Also, I traditionally just like it when teams have a traditional big or at least some type of size to help with, you know, blocks or rebounds. I think the other team that fits the archetype of going small would kind of be like the Rockets when they ran like a super micro ball lineup where no one was like really over 6'8" or 6'9", and they struggled oftentimes with rebounding. Where are you at with that type of fit? Do you think the Pelicans can really overcome this and just become their own blueprint?
Yeah, and I see the chat. I fixed it. I didn't realize that I had the wrong mic. It was connected to my headphones. So shout out to y'all for telling me.
Dope.
Let me know if we clear now. But
yeah,
man. I mean, I think against certain matchups, you're right when you say Zion's the key. Like, you know, it's hard to talk about anything when it comes to this team without mentioning Zion. It's almost impossible when you talk about, like, even the playoff series last year, Zion wasn't available. He didn't play. So what can you really take from the series they had when they got swept against Oklahoma City? It's tough. You really can't, because he changes everything. He's an ecosystem. He's one of 5 to 10 players that can completely transform games at any moment. It's just how he is. And that's on both sides of the floor. Like, he hides a lot of flaws.
Yeah.
Last year, some of their better lineups, and you mentioned it as well about them, it was them when they went small, and whether it was Larry Nance or Dyson Daniels out there, whether it was even small backcourts with CJ McCollum and Jose Alvarado, or even Trey Murray. Like, you put Zion out there and they'll figure it out. The more space you gave him, the better everything worked. The more they were able to get out and transition, and defensively they figured it out. Now, it helps when you have a Herb Jones. It helps when Trey Murphy stepped up the way he did to end the season last year defensively. That's the key. Like, Zion definitely needs help, but it's just something about him that changes everything. And it's been that way since he's been in New Orleans, but he also turned into a different player. He was in some of the best shape that we've seen him. And then we started to see more blocks, more steals, him taking on certain matchups that maybe in previous years he would have turned, away from. Choosing to guard Kawhi Leonard, like asking for that matchup, taking Steph Curry on switches in a very important game to end the season on the road on second night of a back-to-back. We hadn't seen Zion do that, and he played 70 games last year.
Yeah.
So if that guy eventually, which I think will happen, whenever that guy shows up, you can get away with a lot. But when you have Herb Jones, you mentioned Dejounte Murray with less responsibility, and Trey Murphy being able to kind of close gaps when guys choose to, when point guards try to penetrate, he was another guy blocking shots, getting his hand on more deflections, rebounding the basketball. If he has those guys out there helping him, and he's the dude that he was to end last season, it can work. And it can be really, I think, tough for teams to have to deal with, because, with that spacing, with that amount of ball handling, with that amount of special just talents and archetypes, you throw Zion out there, man, it's just tough to deal with. And that's you, but you see that all the time when it comes to other superstars in the league. Just take over games like that and change the way teams have to deal with them.
I like the Zion point, because I'm pretty sure I said this in last year's pod, but I don't think I fully emphasized this. Like, I was one of the biggest Zion's fan, man. I mean, watching him in college transition to the NBA, again, I'll never forget in Pelicans history, like his debut game where he was electrifying, where this guy that we thought was going to be hurt, out of shape or whatever, hit big threes and just changed the momentum of that game. You guys lost. It just spoke to the impact of what Zion could do. And year after year after year, his injuries kind of keep him out from really, accomplishing his true potential. But then last year, it comes down to a playing game versus the Lakers. And it's like the entire world is watching this. And I think this was the way Zion avenged his prior matchup. Because again, I remember this, right? In season, at the end season tournament time, I think that was probably the lowest point of Zion's season last year. And a lot of people had jokes and things that they were trying to overall get off. And then from that point on, Zion locked in. And in that playing game, we saw him be the best player on the floor with LeBron James and Anthony Davis. That's what he was doing out there. And I just have so many question marks about the Pelicans because they were one of the oddest teams last year in terms of what their best strengths were, right? I think their best defensive lineups, as I have it here, didn't have Zion in all of them, but also their best net rating lineups were their starters. It was like their bench or a assortment of pieces from their bench and their starters. So the continuity aspect, I was kind of questioning, like, damn, like what really is the best version of this true team unlocked? And then in the playing game, even though BI was still going through the injury stuff, I do feel like a part of their closing lineup was we just trust these guys more. And like what that will mean for this season, I just have so many questions about. I mean, that was some of the best basketball I had watched in quite some time last year. They were playing very, very well in that closing stretch until he got hurt. Like, bro, 41 points, Chris?
Yeah. And you know, look, one of the things that people kind of forget, like their best basketball was like you can mention you know, the injury and everything like that, but the best with BI, I think fully healthy, they just had a different synergy going with you know those lineup groups and the you know the groove that Zion was in. What's forgotten is that the issue, like this team started to get hot towards the end of the year. Brandon wasn't out there. He was coming back. He was coming back from an injury that he suffered, I think, at the end of, it might have been March against Orlando. And that, you know, they had to find a whole new nucleus. They had to find a whole new way to win basketball games and be dominant. But it was some of the best that we've seen it. And even, you know, look, the year before when Zion was he played 29 games, but right before he went out, Brandon Ingram was also off the floor during that, was playing some of the best basketball that we had seen through Zion. And I don't think it's a coincidence that when he's the guy and there's no question, it just, everything just changes. The energy's better, and trying to fit Brandon's play style back in has been an issue for this team because they can't figure out how do you make two guys in this league right now that don't take jumpers, that like to get to some of the same spots. How do you make them work? How do you make them play winning basketball together for spacing purposes? When one is off the floor, the other one looks a lot better. They haven't been able to figure out how to do it together. But Zion was just in a different world last season, and during that stretch where he was playing like an MVP candidate before he messed up his hamstring the year before. So, and playing the best game that he's maybe ever played in his career in that Laker game. Brandon's off the floor. It didn't matter who else was out there. They just found a way. You know, they were down like I think 15-17 going into the fourth quarter and came all the way back. It's just because Zion was better than everyone else. So with this team, there has to be so much sacrifice that takes place. But the one person that shouldn't have to sacrifice is Zion. And I think that's what they're figuring out. And that's going to be the key to all of this. No matter how you feel about the small lineups, no matter how you feel about the center position, you know, Brandon Ingram being in a contract year, no matter what you think, it's all about the others figuring out a way to sacrifice. Dejountae Murray, CJ McCollum, who, I mean, I won't even, you know, I think he, when everyone was together, tried to lead the way when it comes to sacrifice and changing his whole shot profile. Trey
even
Murphy,
playing hurt and all that.
Yeah. Trey Murphy fits in, and you know, no matter what you're trying to do, but his form of fitting in had to be on the defensive side of the ball and rebounding because that's what they needed out of him. But Brandon's the key, man, and there's been a lot of emphasis on him shooting more threes, on him buying in and doing other things that don't revolve him holding on to the basketball. And that's going to be the key if we're talking about this team maximizing itself. But it's so hard to even think about, because like I don't know if the team last season wasn't better if you just simply took Brandon off of the team. But you never know, because once again, you had to fit him in after an injury to end the season. And it was just a lot. When teams are playing some of their best basketball and you got to play the Lakers twice in what like 5 days or something like that, they know what they want to do. You're trying to figure out what you want to do, what you're best at when everyone's together. But yeah, I mean, I think it can all work, man. But are the main guys, the guys that aren't Zion Williamson, are they going to sacrifice? Is he going to defend? Is he going to rebound? Are they going to play like a team that has goals that are beyond just being a playing squad and, barely making a first round?
Yeah, I have to say this too, by the way, as a Warriors fan, watching the Pelicans decimate my team by just a lot with the amount of like rim pressure, shooting, and the athleticism. I just think that like that is what gave them so much pop. But to your point, history-wise, this team has always been better when Zion has been at the forefront. I still believe the best stretch from Zion was really his sophomore year when he played almost all the games and he was like dominating, where like he was leading the league in points in the paint. I think his most complete form we saw last year, but just, in terms of like his, pure athleticism and being as efficient as he could, I thought that was his sophomore year. And during that year, he was having the ball more in his hands to basically be their point forward in a way. And to me, I said last year, my biggest question was, can they fit like Giannis and Chris did, where it's two ball dominant guys in a way where Chris can be a bit more portable off the ball, and that is the biggest difference. And I feel like what makes it hard is because Brandon Ingram is not a high volume 3-point shooter and he's more mid-range oriented, he's also just flat out a better player when the ball is in his hands. Because the same way the team looked really good with Zion and Ingram, the season Zion was out, what Brandon Ingram was doing to get that team into the playoffs, and then in the playoffs against the Suns, who went to the finals that year, he showed you the impact of what he could do. So it's a bit hard to make it all work. And that's why the Dejounte Murray trade had me scratching my head a little bit, because Dejounte Murray is another guy where he was a defensive-minded guy first. He grew up on the Spurs, right? Playing defense first. That's what got him on the floor. But once his role expanded offensively, he started to leak, a bit, right? Then they trade him to Atlanta, where he's now having the same battle with Trae Young on, are we going to alternate this? Now he's on a team where, okay, I'm not the great shooter. I'm getting better at every year, but I now have to also sacrifice my touches to Zion, my touches to, I would say BI, and his shooting off the ball. I don't think he has the built up reputation to be dangerous like other, knockdown guys are. So my question now is, how does this make sense in the scope of a regular season for both of these guys to sacrifice? Because I agree, if the Pelicans want to have real success, Zion has to be the guy that does not sacrifice. Zion needs to take more shots. Zion needs to dominate the ball in more ways than one. But with these other two, I question how that can happen.
Yeah, and that's the key. Like, I think, you can use the regular season as an experiment. Right, you can use preseason games and you can use practices to try to figure out how it's going to work, because off of when you look at the talent that the Pelicans have and I think the offensive firepower. Yeah, I mean, man, we know how the regular season goes. Like, there's a lot of times it's the war of attrition, man. So many of those back-to-backs, so many of those 3 games and 4 nights. Those schedule. We got Philadelphia coming out early on saying that their 2 best players or 2 out of their 3 best players will miss a majority of back-to-backs. And they're not the only team that's going to be do that competitive team. So it's hard to even to look at a schedule right now and even say you're going to win this game, you're going to win that game, because so many teams are going to be doing that. The Pelicans put themselves in a situation where, let's say they have a night where Zion isn't going to play a 3rd game in in 4 nights, so he's not going to play a back-to-back in a certain stretch of the year. Well, now you have other guys that are used to having the basketball and used to having to to win games and being higher in the pecking order, coming in and saying, okay, well, now this is the way that we'll play. I think, like, you know, for them, that's what's so interesting, because their talent level, at least, like, when you talk about their top 7 players, you could argue they have at least, you know, 5 to 6 guys that are top 100 NBA players.
Yeah.
Are the roles together and the roles where certain guys are out, how much do they change? Because when Zion is out there, look, there's going to be nights where he doesn't have it, where Brandon needs to take over. There's going to be nights when, you know, Dejountae is going to have to be called upon. There were nights, you know, when CJ may have to score 30. But, you know, yeah, you can experiment with that and figure it out in the regular season and win 50 games. But what is it all going to look like when they went up together? And that's been the issue. Like last year when they won 49 games, it was a mixed bag, because once again, there were so many games where, yeah, the Pelicans won and they beat the hell out of teams when they were fully healthy. But it wasn't where Brandon and Zion went back and forth and they both, you know, they dropped 30 and they dominated games together. It was one or the other.
Agreed.
It was 4 or 5 guys that scored 20 points and, you know, winning a basketball game. When games slow down, you get in the playoffs, it's about superstars. Superstars take over games. And I think they have to figure out how to do that when they're all together and when they're not together. They can get by. I think that they're going to have a lot of games where they just frustrate teams because they just have more talent than you. And outside of Dejountae Murray, their core guys have been together 4 or 5 years. So those dudes know how to play. Dejountae is interesting because you say that they'll tell you that what they missed last year was having a point guard. Like with CJ McCollum not actually being that kind of guy. And they'll tell you that disrupted how they were able to close games and how they were able to structure things, how organized they were. But that's only one side of it. He is another guy that's going to need the basketball. He's another guy that likes to get to the same spots as Dejountae Murray and CJ McCollum. So, you're asking guys to play a myriad of personalities that maybe they haven't done in a while. The best thing I can tell you about Dejountae is that I think he knows his role already and knows what's going to make this team, when whole, work best. I think he's observant of that. And I think he knows that, especially for a team that's limiting in front court, defensive presence, and they're limiting in guys that are going to be able, dominant rebounders out the gate. Dejountae is going to have to do some of that stuff, which means he's going to have to, like you said, tap into some of those things that he did in San Antonio. He hasn't. The last time I don't think he's ever played on a team that has this many talented guys, right? Trey Murphy's going to get paid over $100 million. Herb Jones just went to an all, just had an all defensive team year, and is one of the more underrated glue guys in the league. Like, CJ McCollum is a professional scorer, 20 points a game, however many years. You got, you got BI, you got Zion. Like they have a laundry list of guys that can do a bunch of different things. Dejountae has to figure out night to night, who does he need to be and what's going to best help the team that they're playing. Will it help that this is the least amount of responsibility that he's had in a long time? He says that one of the reasons he wasn't the defender that he had been in years past was because he had to do so much on the offensive side of the floor and was fitting in playing with Trae Young. Is that the truth or is it not? I don't know. What can he learn from what he had to do off ball with Trae Young and what he had to do coming up in San Antonio as a defender and as a rebounder and kind of just getting his opportunities when he can make them work early on. Now, I'm not talking the last couple years in San Antonio. Can he merge those two together? I think he's aware enough to do it. But just like with everything else, man, you really don't know with this team because you don't see it enough. In the preseason, Brandon Ingram came back tonight. You know who didn't play? Zion. Nope. So, it's always tough with this team. I believe that they're going to beat up on a lot of middling and bad teams. But what are they going to do against good teams, especially early on, to make up for some of the things that they lack? And what will be their superpower? It can't just be last year, gifted they were able, those small ball lineups, they could bring them in to start second quarter and kind of switch a game, right? What do you do when you're starting games that way and there is no Jonas Valanciunas to take up the first 8 to 10 minutes, or even, a Larry Nance, and
who was big for them last year. Yeah.
I mean, those are the things that they're going to have to figure out. And will that take 10 games, or will they be able to figure out right away?
Yeah, I think these are great questions that are posed, which is why I kind of feel like the Pelicans might be one of those teams that sneakily enough are eyeing players for the trade deadline and maybe add to this roster to kind of fill those roles. I'm curious in terms of like what you would be eyeing to really get this roster to where you think it can get.
I think they surely need a center, or even an option, and either that center has to specialize in the ability to stretch the floor, or that center needs to specialize in protecting the rim. Like you got to think about what works best with Zion Williamson. And in his time in New Orleans, he hasn't had either of those. He hasn't had a real stretch five, and he hasn't had a rim protector. Jackson Hayes was supposed to be at one point one or the other. He never materialized into it. Jonas Valanciunas can make it through every now and then, but no one would say that he's a stretch five. Derek Favors wasn't a stretch five. Steven Adams wasn't a stretch five, and none of those guys as well were rim protectors. Guys who put fear in folks that wanted to get down the lane. They didn't have the athleticism to match what this team kind of needed. Even with a great on-ball point of attack defender, and even adding another one with Dejountae, even at his worst, I think Dejountae has the ability to be a really good on-ball and off-ball defender. His last couple of years, he still was really active when it came to steals and deflections. It's just some of the other things.
Yeah.
And we know Herb Jones is going to do whatever the team needs at a really high level, but they need to figure that out. At some point, what option will they go to at that position that's going to be able to do one or the other? Stretch the floor really well, knock down, 38% of their threes minimum, or being able to be an enforcer of sorts and protect the basket. Because their strength, I think, defensively is the way that they're going to be able to rotate, their ability to get their hands on passes, a lot of wingspan out there.
All the pace.
Yeah. Weak side and being able to get in transition and go. That's going to be their strength. Someone that's an eraser type, even if it's for 20 minutes a game, I think is going to matter. And that may involve getting one of the cooks out of the kitchen. Is that CJ McCollum? Is that Brandon Ingram? They got to figure it out, because look, Zion played 70 games last year, but unfortunately, even last year, you didn't get a chance to see him in the playoffs. People don't remember he's not played in a play-in or playoff game. He hasn't. This team has been in the play-in or the playoffs the past 3 years. Zion's not played in one of the games outside of he played the Laker game, but he didn't finish it.
Right.
So, he has to somehow get to the finish line. I don't know, by stripping away multiple playmakers. Some believe CJ McCollum and Brandon Ingram both need to go. I don't know if that's the case. I think they need to keep one of them. I could see you making both work if both are committed to doing what it means to work next to Zion. You mentioned Milwaukee, man. The difference between Chris Middleton and Giannis is that Chris knows who's the guy.
He knows his role.
Yeah. Does Brandon know that Zion Williamson is the guy? Does he respect it? And will he 100% lean into it? And will his game match what they need? What that means, you can't take 3 threes a game, Brandon. That means you can't take 4. You probably got to be around 5 or 6. CJ took damn near 8.
Yeah.
And if Brandon gets those attempts up, then maybe folks will stop saying, okay, well, let's see what Trey Murphy looks like with Brandon Ingram versus what happens if we swap them out. Trey Murphy starts and you trade Brandon Ingram for, I don't know, Jared Allen, Miles Turner. I mean, whatever center, Jakob Porter, whoever you think it is, maybe subtracting in talent to maybe fill a different role, man. There's a lot of things that they can do, but I think for this team, they're gonna need to now that they got a point guard, they got to figure out what they're gonna do at the center position, or they're going to have to move on from either Brandon Ingram or CJ McCollum to give a little bit more space, and less, I guess, less ball dominant fixtures or guys that enjoy being their best when they have the basketball in their hands.
So this I'm happy about where we're going with the conversation, because this was my thing with the Pelicans too. I said this after the season ended, based off of the games that I watched and the film that I did. I came to the conclusion that for me, I think this team would be better without Brandon Ingram. And it took me a while to get there. I still feel like Ingram's value when Zion has a bad game, we've seen him play very, very well. We've seen him dominate the Suns defense in the playoffs. I won't forget that run. We saw him floor raise this team who was at the bottom, right? Many losses to squeak into the play-in and then make the playoffs, right? So I respect that value. However, my thing with Brandon Ingram is that word, role. And what makes it hard for me to know if he'll buy in or not is he couldn't buy in playing with more talented guys in Team USA, right? And then when he comes back to the season, we're still seeing, okay, Zion seems to have his best games without Ingram. Ingram seems to play the best without Zion. And I just think that paired with Ingram being inconsistent at times defensively really makes me wonder if it's worth it or not. Because I got to say, man, the leaps that we see Trey Murphy every year take is serious. And I said this, Trey Murphy and Herb Jones together on the floor carries the Pelicans defense and makes it way more viable. Also, they play fast, right? They get off the ball fast and they can shoot. Also, sidebar, Herb Jones improving to become a legitimate threat to shoot the basketball is a big part of why his value is a lot better. So to me, it's like, okay, is the reason why we're not starting Trey Murphy because we have Brandon Ingram on the team? Because to me, in a vacuum, even though Brandon Ingram is a better player, that sounds more like politics than basketball fit.
There you go.
And like, if you're trying to win, it's not about politics. It's about putting out the best product, bar none. I get the CJ stuff because I can agree there's times where sometimes CJ does do too much, but I still think stylistically, a volume three-point shooter who shoots above 40% on almost 8 threes a game consistently, I think that type of value guy is still there. And also, I think as a veteran presence can still bring you good value for his last years here on this team. The problem, though, Chris, and this is where I think they're not going to trade CJ, and they might see it through one more year with Brandon Ingram, is the fact that Brandon Ingram has a player option. A lot of teams weren't interested in that player option. And at the end of the day, are you trying to dump his contract for limited value, or do you see it through? I think that's really the main thing that I'm going in between on, because yes, it sounds great in theory to just trade this guy, sure. But is the grass always greener if you're not getting great value back? If you're not getting guys who can fit the vision you want to build around Zion? Because having a guy who can legitimately go out there and get you 30, he has that talent, and you're just asking him to fit into the role. Maybe they could regret doing that. So I can understand the hesitancy, but I think in terms of the numbers, I think in terms of the defensive lineups and just play style, I think things are just a lot simpler when Zion is at the forefront. Prime example, right? In the playing game that I watched the game like 4 times now. I really felt like Jose Alvarado was their point guard in those spots. I was like seeing the defense come together, and it's like, damn, it makes so much sense without Brandon Ingram, who's on the bench. So,
and I think what gets complicated with that gifted is that people say, they take it as if, well, if you're removing Brandon Ingram for the, from the equation, who are you replacing him with? And I totally understand that. But like, this team is set up as if they think that they're Boston, right? To where Boston they've welcomed in so many different talents that have come from other situations or previous seasons where they were either the guy or number 2 or number 3. So, when you're talking about, Porzingis, Jason Tatum, Drew Holiday, Jaylen Brown, but Derek White, the difference is that the Celtics have won and been a part of winning situations, or at least winning playoff series, before they started making all these different changes. You know what I'm saying? Way before. Jason Tatum was in the conference finals his rookie year. Jaylen Brown was right there with him. So they had their own issues, but it wasn't like they were trying to figure out, well, damn, how are we going to get to 50 wins? It wasn't like, are we going to be in the play-in this year? Boston didn't have that issue. So they just had to keep resetting to figure out, well, who's going to finish this thing? Milwaukee went through a similar situation where they reset many different times once they realized Giannis was the guy. and they did things people thought were crazy. You know, trading Jabari Parker. They just did it again, trading Drew Holiday to go get Dame Lillard, and then Drew goes and wins another championship with Boston. So you're not always right with it, but when you look around, they don't have 4 or 5 different guys that can get you. They have averaged 20 points a game in this league because they don't need it. When you look at Dallas, it isn't Kyrie, Luka, and a third or fourth guy who's deadly who can get you 20 a night.
It's good basketball fits.
It's just good basketball fits and good role players. Like that's what most teams are. When you look at Minnesota last year, even with their bad fit, they didn't have as many guys. I watched Jalen McDaniels a couple years ago when I think Ant Edwards was out, and I was watching McDaniels do things I didn't know he could do offensively. And then I watched him when Ant came back, Cat was out, and he was scoring 15, close 20 a night, operating in the mid post. I'm like, McDaniels can do this? Well, yeah. Guess what happened when everyone's healthy? He goes back and sits in the corner. And goes back to being a 3-and-D guy. Like, they have to figure out how to make less more. And it's either going to have to be, it takes a lot of sacrifice and a lot of ego checks from Brandon, because it's not just like you're just putting a really good. I know people see, oh, he's 25-5. He's averaged 24 points, but a game he was an all-star. Great, but sometimes you're gonna need a real efficient 15.
Yes. Some
nights you're gonna need a real efficient 10 points. I think Zion knows that. I think Dejountae knows that. I know CJ McCollum knows that. Herb Jones and Trey Murphy don't have to know that because that's just how they are. But they're gonna get theirs and do what makes them best without the basketball, without having a dribble to make something happen. Can Brandon switch up mentally? Because that's gifted. What we're talking about right now are the same things other teams are asking. You brought up FIBA, right?
Yeah.
One of the things they wanted him to do was go sit in the corner. Hey, we need you to be Jaden McDaniels. That's actually what we need you to be. We need you in some sense to be a small ball 5, protect the rim. That might mean, hey, bro, we got Jalen Brunson, we got Ty Halliburton, we got Austin Reeves, we got. Not saying all these players are better than you pound for pound, but we have point guards and twos. We don't need you to dribble the ball like you want to. We don't need you to ISO at the mid post. You're gonna get your opportunities, but these other guys and Edwards, these other guys are gonna get the basketball. Unfortunately, before you. Can you turn down your volume and still be a really good basketball player? That's what makes winning guys. That's what makes more teams around the league want you and want to pay you $50 million. And with this new CBA gifted, it just ain't just simple as, I'm sure there's a lot of teams that say, we could fit Brandon Ingram, man. We would like him, but not for $50 million. And we don't know we're getting a player that will do whatever it takes to win. But not just that, be good at it. That's what, to me, that's Brandon Ingram's biggest struggle. I've seen him go out and score 9 points, have 10 rebounds and 8 assists. But it wasn't like he just took 5 shots. He took 12. He also kind of had a bad game. I think he will do whatever it takes to win. I've seen him, improve as a defender. I've seen him be more willing to get off the ball. Haven't seen him shoot as many threes as he should game to game, which is going to be really interesting for this year. But can he be a great player at it? Can we look at him and say, well, damn, he's getting the basketball left, his usage is down, but he's even better. Like, last year didn't look like a dude that averaged 20 points per game because he was sacrificing consistently. It looked like dude from time that, from sometimes that just had struggled being himself.
Yeah.
He said it was the worst that he's looked as a New Orleans Pelican, he said last season. That's what he said. And he ironically played the most amount of games he has played as a New Orleans Pelican. So he played about 64, 65 games. That was the most, even with a couple injuries that he had. It's not even at this point even about willing. I think that he's ignored some things he probably needs to address, which is the shooting, which is the getting to the line more, either or, not settling for as many contested mid ranges as he does. But okay, when you do decide to be all in to being a team player, being back in a FIBA setup, will you be great at it?
Right.
Can you be either or? Can you adapt on the fly? That's the thing about BI. And if BI is able to do that, what changes the way everyone looks at him. It changes but his fit on winning basketball, Gifted, can't be conditional on whether or not he's getting 20, 25 shots the way that he wants to get 20 shots a night.
Yes. Yeah, I could not agree more. For the people listening that might not understand what Chris is saying, I think the perfect example, bar none, in the league, period, has to be Devin Booker. How you see a star player who can play with Chris Paul, who can play with Bradley Beal, who can play with a player, to the caliber of I would say Durant, right? But then in Team USA, this guy goes into a role and is like the unsung hero of the team, where I'm not going to be LeBron. I'm not going to be KD. I'm not going to be all these guys, but I'm going to excel in my role. And they were better because of it. Can he do that? And also Devin Booker, who hasn't been a great defender overall, stepped up defensively when they needed him to do that. The question is, can Brandon Ingram do that in a similar role? And my biggest question on top of all this, though, is this isn't just like some random season. This is a contract season. And what do we see from most guys who are going under contract years? They feel the pressure to play the best they've ever played so they can get paid the most they've ever been paid. And for BI, a guy that has, gone from the Lakers to the Pelicans, this next contract means a lot to him. It really does. So to me, it's like, is he going to learn from that and say, okay, I'm going to play my role, I'm not going to worry? Or is he going to force the issue because of that? I don't know the answer to that.
Yeah. I mean, that's the key. I don't think people question his talent. They question his fit.
Yeah.
And they question his fit. Like, he's no longer a dude that's 24 or 23 years old. He's no longer a talent that's rising in the league. When you start to get to this age, people accept you for what you've shown. They start to say, this is who you are. And it's a dude that's entering, which typically around, I think he's 28. This should be starting
your best years.
Yeah, it should. Well, what Brandon has to figure out what that looks like. There's a lot of guys, man, that can go out and get empty numbers. They can go out and get 20, 25 a night on bad teams and eat that way. But there's no true longevity in that after a period of time. It's just not. Eventually, you have to change. You have to adjust, or you'll waste. You'll get bored, and you don't want your reputation to be a guy who puts up empty numbers. He doesn't want to be that guy. He wants to. I think he has a skill set that should benefit any kind of situation when he chooses to apply himself and do that. And if you're saying all it is get to the rim a little bit more and or shoot a couple more threes and we'll figure out the rest, most people will take that. But it's a tough situation for him, because I think he had a reality check that I don't think he felt he deserved.
Yeah.
And he won't be the last, talented guy that will be in that situation. If Zach LaVine was up for a contract extension like Brandon is right now, he would be going through the same thing. He will be trying to figure out the same thing that BI is right now. But you're going to see other players that go through the same thing. It's like, all right, we'll pay you. We're not paying you $50 million a year unless you can change this, unless you can change your pace, unless you can change a bunch of different things about your style of play and the way that you operate out there. Can you be flexible no matter if we're full strength or if we're not? You're going to have I think what good players start to realize, Gifted, is that let's say you shoot the ball 18 times a game. Let's say that's what you want to do. Let's say you shoot the ball 15 to 14. There's a myriad of ways to do that. There's ways to get those shots. There's ways over the course of the year that you will be able to get those opportunities. Sometimes you just got to change the way you look at it. You know what I'm saying? And for him, I don't again, I don't know if it's even a lack of want to or will at this point. I just think it's a situation where he needs to evolve. And now this is the period where I think the league is telling him that he needs to evolve and show a new version of himself, to where the Brandon that he was last year or 2 years ago is gone. It doesn't, that Brandon isn't as attractive in this current market today. So how do you make a new Brandon? How do you introduce a new, and he's in a perfect situation, Gifted, the perfect situation to do so because he's playing around with so many different talented guys.
Yes.
So what folks don't realize is that if you're able to win with this team, teams ain't gonna forget that you was just dropping 24. They'll say, man, he changed everything.
And he brought into a role. Yep.
Yeah, he brought it. So now will you be more attractive to even some bad teams that say we want you to lead us going forward because what you did. Now we'll give you back some of that opportunity and that money you were looking for. You'll also be attractive to those winning teams to say, we think that you're the final piece based off what you've shown there. You get into our program, our system, play with our kind of players. You did that last year. You can there's ways for him to get everything he wants, but he has to attach himself to it even when he doesn't want to. It's just some people are able to go through this a little bit earlier in their career. Some it happens too late. It got to happen now for BI.
I couldn't agree more with anything you're saying because, again, the talent. I mean, I can walk you through, Chris, how many times in my head I've thought to myself, okay, heading into this season, here's how I would use BI's talent. Okay, you have a guy that can shoot the ball at a very high level. What I would use is, okay, can we run inverted screens with Zion? Where now, if you switch, BI has a mismatch. Now he can get the ball in the same spot he likes to potentially operate from, right? Or can you operate in more DHOs with CJ McCollum, where if they are going to respect his shot, you have the one dribble wing pull up, right? Like that's what he excels at. And to me, it's like, if you could just take his talent and fit it into the Pelicans hypothetically in these types of ways, this team could be a very good team.
Yeah. It puts a lot of pressure on the coaching staff to also try to find ways to fit. And I think the players will go out of their way in respect for Brandon to try to get him. Like, man, those people want him to have his money, get his money as well. Yeah. They ain't gonna hate on him, but it's just that again, that involves Brandon doing something that we just haven't seen him do over a full stretch. And it can't be it just can't be based around who's on the floor. He has to change his entire mental identity. I think that there are ways from a schematic standpoint where you could make all of this shit work. But right. It still means that, like, CJ I think is a perfect example. CJ, I remember I did a Spaces show on Twitter a couple years ago, and we had CJ, we had Larry Nance, and we had Trey Murphy.
Yeah.
And one of the things CJ said was that he realized that with so many guys that wanted to get to the mid-range, including himself, with so many dudes that wanted to get to similar spots, somebody had to sacrifice. And I think he realized early, well, there's one guy who has the ability to shoot that maybe won't as much outside of his favorite spots, and there's some guy that's just not going to shoot at all. So it got to be me. So I know we respect CJ as a three-point shooter and so on and so forth. We respect him and his ability to shoot the basketball, but you forget that he was one of the best mid-range shooters from a percentage perspective. And I think it might still stand since he entered the league. He's been elite. He's at least top 5.
Yeah.
So that's telling you that get into the middle of the floor, getting some DHOs and going down here, stopping and shooting on the go, getting screens against teams that are running drop and taking advantage of that at the free throw line. Like, those were things that he lived off of. And in combination with his ability to shoot off ball, playing next to Dame Lillard, you had to from 3. He almost took out the mid-range completely. To him, it turned into, I'm either taking threes or I'm getting floaters and layups.
Right.
I'm taking less mid-range jumpers. He decided he was aware enough to make that change on his own. Brandon has to go through that same realization. It's not a knock on your ability because you take less contested middies. It's not a knock on you. What up, top dog? It's not a knock on you because, you have to, because you play a little faster. People ain't trying to change you or your game, and it's not a knock on who you are. Just saying, here's where the game is.
Yep.
That's just it. Here's what you think. Certain bigs just wanted to, didn't want to be on a block. and operate like Al Jefferson for their entire career.
I would say prime example, Brook Lopez brought into his role. Used to be that type of guy back in the day.
He knew to get the most out of his career going forward. He had to change his game and shoot more threes and be good at it. Now we're talking about a dude that's in the latter years of his career. The latter years of his career,
it's still getting paid.
It's still getting paid, and over the past few years was more useful in his mid 30s, early 30s than he was when he was younger and had a little bit more athleticism and and more things to kind of throw at you from night to night.
Yeah, less
of that back to basket, guys. Just that was him making that change to saying, "Yo, I'm gonna be a fossil. I'm gonna be extinct." That's just how it is. Unless if Brandon was Jimmy Butler gifted, if Brandon was DeMar DeRozan, might be different. Maybe you could look at it a little bit differently. But even those guys, none of those guys that played with Zion Williamson. Yeah. When Jimmy Butler played with Derrick Rose and Derrick Rose was right, it was supposed to be Derrick Rose's team until it wasn't anymore. So I mean that's just how it is, man. BI, I think has to be real about it. Like he's not a number one option in this league, not for a good team, and for some teams he might not be a number two option on a team that wants to win a championship. We don't know. He got to figure that out, and that takes a real look in the mirror, man. If he wants to be in this league from 5-7 years down the line and be the kind of player that I think his ultimate guy Gibbs should have him as.
I think this is a great conversation about BI. I think all these points are things that I have been really echoing for some years now, especially after the way last season ended. But again, I mean, this is pretty much, I would say, like his last shot to prove it because of his player option. And also the biggest thing you mentioned, the new CBA. People don't understand how impactful the new CBA is with how restrictive it is. So guys that could make this money in the past, teams are like, damn, do we really want to hard cap ourselves and not be able to improve our team dramatically with you on the roster? Do we want to like really lower our chances at changing the scenery if we do this? Like now they're thinking twice about paying players the amount of money they would compared to 2013 where we saw so many like bad contracts in 2015, 2016. Now it's like, damn, am I really going to hard cap myself to where I can't aggregate, contracts and whatnot? So to me, this will be his real year to prove if he can do that. I guess my other question would be, outside of BI though, for this team, what are the key players you really want to see more of on this team? Are you higher on what a Hawkins can do for this team, or what do you think like some things you need to see?
Man, Jordan Hawkins is an interesting guy, man, because I think there are some folks that when they traded Dejountae Murray, when they traded for Dejounte Murray and they moved Dyson Daniels, for example, like you thought, and Najee Marshall leaving, you thought, damn, like, okay, that's giving Jordan a little bit more runway.
It was very hard, by the way, for me to see him leave because I was saying it all season. Najee Marshall was the glue for the Pelicans. He did everything you needed him to. My bad about that. It's a tangent, but I loved this game a lot. I did.
And Najee, man, Najee just brings a different level of like intensity, man. Just I think a really good dude. I got a chance to meet, some people in his family. He's been he was really supportive of like he fit in with the city. When he was there. So and I don't think he wanted to go. If I can be 100% honest with you, I'm not sure if he wanted to go, but the team had to make they had to make some kind of change because you already got all these different wings and forwards. You got Trey Murphy, you got Herb Jones, you got Brandon Steele, Zion's a 4, and you have Jordan Hawkins. You needed a little bit less if you're going to put him out there to play, and you invested a first round pick, a lottery pick to get him. Last year was a mixed bag because with all of his there was a point where he was playing like one of the better rookies in the game, just based off his shooting the basketball and then being able to create his entire game off of that. Was also a plus rebounder. Yeah, it became a little streaky, but he fell out of favor, I would say, when everybody was healthy because he just couldn't defend like the team wanted him to. Couldn't stay out of foul trouble, wasn't strong enough, but he was a rookie. Like those things happen. But in regards to his shooting ability,
it's legitimate.
It's legitimate.
It's legit. Yeah.
It's repeatable. And I think for a dude that shot like 36%, it's the most elite 36% you're gonna see. It's like that, man. Like when you watch him play and watch him shoot, you think every shot's going in.
Off the move too. Like it does a lot for you.
The mentality is there. He's smart. He's a winner. But Jordan Hawkins puts in the work. So anytime you have a shooter with his ability, we get back to talking about Zion. No different than what Trey Murphy provides. You need that guy out there. You can't find a reason not to play him. You're gonna have to get over the fact that what he can't do, because what he can do, scoring, pump fakes, plays you can run for him, get into his spots in the mid-range, but just simply being able to shoot in transition on the move, stand still, it's just needed. And it carries, and it's always gonna be on a scouting report. Doesn't matter if Jordan's 0 for 7, he's 7 for 7. Somebody's coming towards him to close out. They're not.
He has that respect. Yeah.
Already.
Yep.
So, I think what's interesting for Jordan is that now, and especially to start the year with Trey Murphy, coming back from a hamstring injury, I think he has a little bit of time before his evaluation is over and he's back out there. But he won't miss a whole bunch of games. But now it's even a bigger need for having someone with Jordan's ability. The best thing about him is that I don't know if he has, the staff that he's necessarily a favorite because he's, the Willie Green and company. You got to think of some of the guys that they've latched on to over the years. Herb Jones was the 2nd round pick. Najee Marshall was undrafted. Jose Alvarado was undrafted.
Yep.
I know everyone likes what they've seen from Trey Murphy and what he's become. What people don't forget, what people seem to forget is that, man, that first year when they went a play-in game, the season was on the line against the Clippers, and Tony Snell was subbed in before Trey Murphy. Like, things like this happen. They traded for Josh Richardson last year, and Josh Richardson was getting time with Zion off the floor. When Zion hurt, a couple years ago, they traded for Josh Richardson. There was a period where Josh Richardson was getting a start over Trey Murphy. And everybody's like, yo, I know he might not be able to rebound, like he should. I know he's not the defender that you want a Virginia wing to be coming out, but he'll figure it out. You got to let this guy go out there and play because he's a dynamic scorer and a dude that can make some things happen at the rim. Elite free throw shooter. What are we doing? Let him figure it out. Same thing has to be given to Jordan because the need based off of what this team has and how they're kind of set up screams for dudes that can shoot and don't need to dribble the basketball. And they're more of a role player guy, microwave guys. It's a need. Jordan, I think, can fight over that though, and as just the mentality, man. Like he wears 24 for a reason. Like that's you. He thinks every shot's going in. He believes he's one of the best players on the floor and plays like it. Yeah, I think now he'll get the opportunity with some guys that are gone, but more importantly, to start the year with Trey Murphy being out. And I mean, so far in the preseason, he's taking advantage of that opportunity, to making the most of his opportunities, not being a streaky shooter and knocking down every possible shot he can. I like him a lot, man. And I don't know what he turns into long term, but I know he got to be out there, and I think he will.
So I love what you said about him because I don't watch college like that. I'll just be honest about that. I don't. But every year, like I watch videos on like what each prospect does well, and when I saw Jordan Hawkins tape, I'm like, wait a minute, he's shooting like that off the catch, pull-ups, like I'm seeing that, and I'm like, so many teams can use his skill set. When I saw Pelicans, I'm like, this is the perfect fit to Zion because it's not just about how efficient you are, but it's the types of shots you shoot, right? When you see Trey Murphy make the like deep logo long ball, like how that spreads out the range for the court is big. And when you have Zion, who's one of the best rim attackers in the league on volume in that space, you create so many easy driving lanes for Zion off that space, especially when you don't just have to be a guy who stands around, but when you can run around off of screens and shoot, because now you are creating open cuts to the basket, which lead to, okay, we now have three people in the paint. Zion swing, ball movement, good possession, right? That's what that leads to. So Jordan Hawkins is a guy to me that can absolutely elevate the shot quality of his teammates by just being out there. The defense is a concern. It has been a question, but to be fair to him, you're right. He's a rookie. And one thing that I know for a fact, right, is going back to the new CBA, players like Jordan Hawkins, their value elevates because he's on his rookie contract, which means you're paying him less money than other players who might have to fit a role that is close, which means if you can squeeze the most value right now out of that, you set yourself up in a pretty good position cap-wise moving forward for the future. So to me, Jordan Hawkins has to get more of a role on this team. But the biggest thing you said is work ethic. He works, right? And I don't think that's just on one side of the basketball. I'm pretty sure that he's heard everything that people have said about him as a complete basketball player. And what I do know for a fact is the good teams, they don't wait to develop their players. They get them in at the right time, right? Prime example, Christian Brown as a rookie player was playing meaningful minutes in the playoffs for the Nuggets when they won that championship title. Yeah. He didn't play that many minutes, but when he came in, his impact was felt, and the coach trusted him enough in high leverage moments. I think the same needs to be made for Hawkins if you want to see him develop into that player you really want in the next 2 years.
And I mean, Christian Braun's a perfect example because they set him up to be in a situation that he's in now with KCP being gone.
Yeah.
Right. That's the business part of all of this, man, is that you're setting up the new players you're drafted at some point to take someone's job. No one talks about it enough, but that's the truth. And you gotta be you have to put these young guys, these talented, they all have strengths. You have to find a way to play them to their strengths to where they're able to take the next person's job. One reason Dyson Daniels didn't work in New Orleans because I'm not sure the team did the best job. He wasn't perfect, but I don't know if the team always did the best job of putting him in positions to take the next person's job, whoever it was. Certain guys can persevere through it. Trey Murphy was one that did. It was evident that Herb Jones was a guy that you had to have on the floor immediately. But those guys don't grow on trees. Certain guys you got to help lead that way. You got to, you have to carry them a little bit. You have to guide them there. I think Jordan Hawkins is a dude that can persevere past it, but he can't do it if you got him, tagged on the bench. Mm-hmm. There were times that maybe the Nuggets could have played Christian Braun a little bit more, and politics got in the way. But they seem to look like they had a plan for him along the way. Pelicans hopefully are showing that they have a plan, that they're gonna have a plan. Because Jordan Hawkins is a useful player, and guess what? There's a lot of guys with his skill set around the league as a shooter that can't defend.
Yeah,
I just watched him in this preseason game just scored 9 straight points. I mean, there's a lot of guys that can't defend, but you know what good coaches and good leaders do? Gifted, they don't say what can't you do. Everybody can see that.
What can you do?
What can you do? How can we make the best of it? If the Pelicans are able to do that, defensive coach and all, defensive principles and all. Team that's finished top 10 in defense for the past 3 years and all, guys like Jordan Hawkins have to get runway, and he's wired to do it. They got to lean into it.
Yeah. And like, I'm actually happy that you brought up his name because that brings me to my second to last thing, right? The head coaching position for the Pelicans, I have never seen so many flip-flops on, is he a good coach? Is he a bad coach? All this and all that. What do you think of your head coach, Willie Green? Do you think that he's been put in the best position to succeed? And moreover, do you think he gives you the best chance to win with this current roster?
I never like to say that no one can, because I would hate for someone to say that about the present version of me.
Right.
I would hate that, in my job, for someone to say, oh, he'll never figure it out. I would like to hear it and use it as added motivation. I think that one of the things you can't afford to do in life is be stubborn and not be
maybe flexible. You talking about?
Yeah. Like I don't think you can afford to do that. And as a coach in sports, the game changes like that, man. It evolves quickly. You gotta evolve with it or get left behind. Same conversation that we were having about Brook Lopez and Brandon Ingram, it applies to Willie Green. It's okay to have a type of player that you like. It's okay to have a certain type of style that you like. But what best fits what you have? If I go in the house right now, the gift, and I say I want lasagna, but all I have are ingredients for macaroni and cheese, I probably shouldn't try to make lasagna. Like, I shouldn't. I should make the best of the ingredients that I have. And I think that's something he has to figure out. And part of that's just being stubborn. It's sticking with certain players, certain styles, certain situations too long versus leaning into even the things that make you uncomfortable. That's how you grow as a leader and as a coach in this league and stay 5-10 years. You grow with the times. Even if it's against your main principles, you find a way to make your things, the things that you love to do work mixed in with what you have to do to win.
Right.
And with this team, it leans into guys like Jordan Hawkins. It leans into Trey Murphy. It leaves into space. Back threes that are considered good threes that weren't considered when you were playing, Willie. No matter how gritty a guy is as a basketball player, they remind you of you. If they're not as talented and they're keeping somebody who could probably help the team in a different way, like, they can play too. I mean, just because a guy doesn't, like, you may value and say, man, this guy plays really good defense, but he can't shoot. Well, you got to kind of find a way to appreciate the guy who plays a lot of offense that can't stop line drives as well.
Yep.
You got to figure it out. That's a part of the job. And that's why, if you ask me today, do I think he's the guy? No. But could he be the guy if he shows that he can adapt to what the team needs at any moment, to what the roster's asking for, and to what the league is asking for, more modern things? No one cares if you're top 10 in defense if you can't score 100 points in 2024. If you go through a playoff series, there's no reason that even with a hobble Brandon Ingram, that the Pelicans against a great Thunder team, there's no reason that they, I think, did not score over 100 points in one playoff game. There's no reason. Not with still Trey Murphy, Brandon Ingram, even on one leg, but CJ McCollum and company, you should have found a way to score over at least 100 points. It's too easy. You can trip. You can take off a quarter and score 100 in this league today. So part of that falls on him. So if he does and he starts to adapt, then I think his approval rating goes up. If he stays the same, stays stubborn, and stays stuck on old methods and his way of doing things, then no. And that's been part of the issues with some of the things that make him great as a coach and as a leader, are some of the things that also make him that makes it hard for him to, I think, evolve with the times and get better as a coach. And
I honestly think that is the biggest thing about this team as a whole. Honestly, it's the double-edged sword where guys do things very, very well, but some of those things aren't able to evolve themselves enough to make the entire picture, I would say, better, right? You can say the same thing about Brandon Ingram. You can say the same thing about a Dejountae Murray, right? Like how these guys are able to take their skill sets and better blend them in to fit with the team to make everything better, right? Yep. For instance, this coach at times leans so hard on defense, the offense struggles. Prime example, what he was doing in the playoffs and also during the regular season, right? Like these are things that matter, which is why for me, I double back another year in saying they are probably the most interesting team in the Western Conference, because they can really change in terms of, okay, if they trade Brandon Ingram for really good pieces, they can be a great team. Or maybe it doesn't pan out the same way we think it does, right? Or BI buys into a role. They have legitimate point guard play. CJ McCollum evolves and maybe becomes like a 6-man of the year candidate, which I think he really could do that if he wanted to. And then you have a very complete roster. Or Zion Williamson is back to looking like a top 10 player in this league fully, right? Like there's so many different variations of what can happen. Or we get a similar season where they're better without BI, they're better without Zion. In between, their starters are not a high overall net rating. Where do you think ultimately, though, this team can fit in the Western Conference without everything has retooled and revamped?
I mean, yeah, man. I mean, I think if we're talking regular season,
yeah,
I can see them not being in the play-in. They were close last season. I think that they can do it again. I think I could see them winning 50+ games. But now they've proved that they can be in playoff consideration. They've done it 3 years in a row.
Yeah.
They got to figure out how to get to the next step. Of course, you got to win the games first, to end up doing it. And making new rosters, new situations, new emerging talents and teams that are, that are on the rise to do it. But I think that when you're talking Dejountae Murray, CJ McCollum, Trey Murphy, Zion Williamson, Brandon Ingram, Herb Jones, and I'm missing somebody. Those are 6 really, really, really good talents. One that's elite, and another one that has elite moments. The third, between CJ and Dejounte, are going to be able to carry that role, that load when others are out or when someone's having a bad game. In ways most teams, like the drop down, is just it's not very far in regards to responsibility and the ability to step up. And then the other two, when CJ, and Trey Murphy and Herb Jones, are excellent at their roles. They're just excellent at their roles. They're both extremely efficient, and have things that Herb does things that he might have only he might leave the floor with 8 points and might have played the best game on everyone on the floor. You know what I'm saying? And you have to watch the game to actually see it. And Trey Murphy, you'll look up and have 20 points off 11 shots, and you say, damn, how you do that? That's just efficient guy, a dude that's going to be a 50, 40, 90 guy at some point. He's been close to it. He'll do it this year or next year.
Okay.
It's coming. It's just how he is. That's too much talent for, I think, this team not to feast on what regular season basketball is about and beat up on bad and middling teams. Teams are just not going to want in the fourth night of a 3-game stretch or a back-to-back. They're not going to want to say, man, we got to get up and run up and down with these motherfuckers. They're not going to want to do it. A lot of teams aren't going to want to do it. And if they do, they may not have the firepower to be able to keep up. There will be nights, though, where they're reminded of what they don't have. There will be nights where they get destroyed on the glass. There will be nights where one guy fouls out and another big is close to it. Or you watch a game and Herb Jones gets hurt, or Trey Murphy gets hurt because they're dealing with Jokic and he has to miss a couple weeks or something. Like these things are gonna rear their head. But that's what you have the trading deadline for. My biggest question, Gifted, I think about this team is, can they get to the trade deadline and be good? Can they be 10 games over 500 at the trading deadline? If they can do that, I think everything else, the ceiling for them raises up a little bit. Because my question isn't the regular season. I think if you put them in a 7-game series, I just don't know how you can survive with their current setup, even with Zion, and you play a team like even Memphis. I don't know how you can make up for that, and when a team can lean in on everything that you don't do well for a 7-game series. I just don't think you can do it and win a playoff series. Not sure. Most teams, the Pelicans and media, they compare themselves to, I think David Griffin compared the Pelicans in some respects to Golden State, and in other respects to old Phoenix teams. But even when Golden State, even if their best lineup, their death lineup was when they went small, they also had Andrew Bogut over the years. They had Kevon Looney. They had Festus Ezeli. They had David West. Like
Andre Iguodala.
Yeah. So I mean, they had the option when they played a team that said, "All right, now bring in a center." Same with Phoenix. Pelicans, I'm not sure if they really have. No one's emerged to really say that Daniel Tice isn't going to be enough. Yves Missy has a long way to go. He's not going to be enough. Can you get to the trade deadline? And if you can, and be able to mask your flaws until then, where it's a night-to-night league and teams don't practice anymore like they used to, and teams don't have as much time to game plan and study, and you're going to have people that catch that New Orleans flu out there on the street, drinking too late, you're going to have an opportunity to be a really good team and get through. But that's going to be the key. If they struggle and their flaws are taken advantage of early, well, that's where you kind of throw your hands up, because you don't have an audible to really go to. Your DNA, the best part of what's going to help you win games is your ability to go small, play fast, and be dominant in transition, and get teams uncomfortable with your ability to switch and rotate defensively. if that becomes a problem, you're going to be in trouble. Because having to just fuck up everything that you've been doing in training camp, to go out and to go and run one of these centers into the paint or into the ground because of what you didn't do in the offseason, it's not going to look good. It's going to go against everything that you've been trying to plan for in the summer. So that's where I'm at.
Yeah, and I would say for everything you said, that is what I've been thinking about this team, because at their best, they have a style that's unique where they can run the floor, sure, but they have a very switchy style where they're comfortable doing a lot of weird things, but also they have the physicality. Some teams can switch a lot, sure, but they don't have like the guys who can get gritty when you need to. I think the Pelicans have shown that they do, right? They have guys who will go get after it on both ends. So that's what makes them so interesting. That's why I would say like the peak for the Pelicans, if everything goes right, is potentially a 4 to 5 seed in the West. I really do believe that. Maybe even higher if Zion can really be the best that he can be as a superstar player. And then I think the low is out of the play-in. And it's funny because there's a lot of other teams in the West I could say that same thing about. That's how, competitive the overall Western Conference is. But watching how the Pelicans fit, and more importantly, how they are by the trade deadline, will definitely have a dramatic impact on how good they finish the overall season. So can't wait to see that. Got to see overall what that shifts to. But Chris, I want to say I appreciate you for doing this pod with me for back-to-back years. This was a very great conversation. We went way over 50 minutes. Shout out to you for that. I did not expect that. Very dope convo, my brother.
Yeah, man. Listen, bro, it's always good talking basketball with people that, like, man, your stuff, bro. Like, I'm amazed at folks that have a favorite team, but then, do all these different previews with people around the league and know and have the amount of detail that you had. You can only do that by really putting your time into your craft and to watching these, watching games, the inner details, and you do your homework, bro. So I think that's important. And it's good when we had these conversations, because maybe, you open me up to a few things that I ain't really think about as someone who's been locked in watching this team, man. So that shows that hats off to you, bro. Keep doing what you're doing.
Hey, man, thanks. I really appreciate it. People like you, for me, are like the diamond tester to me, really seeing if I understand the team, if I know the ball well. And I try to watch back a lot of film because, again, I'm not watching as many games as you guys are on a night-to-night basis. So I defer to you in terms of what the team vibes currently are and things like that. So every year, having a chance to reset that and learn even more is always a dope experience. That's why I love doing it, to give other people that same type of, feel for understanding these teams, because it's hard to watch 30 teams in basketball. There's just like not enough time for like a whole lot of people to really do that. So Chris, I appreciate you. Everyone, make sure to tap in to his stuff. And Chris, we got to link up in season to discuss how the current teams are. I'm definitely going to be hitting you back in season. Really appreciate you, bro.
Let's do it, bro. Appreciate you, man. We'll talk soon. All right.
And I'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace out, people. Have a good one. Salute.